In our minds, prisons exist to keep criminals away from society. Our instinct is to stay as far away from rapists, murderers, burglars, and drug dealers. But what do you do when your job requires you to go into a prison every day? Do you actually come face to face with these convicts? Or do you see the humanity and the story behind each one of these inmates? No one knows more about this than my next guest and good friend Michelle, as she went to work in a prison as a recreational therapist every day. Today, we are going to learn all about the prison system and what it really takes to have a career behind bars. Hi, I'm Red Younger, and this is It's My Job to Know Yours. Hey Michelle, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Red?
I it's been a long day and I am glad that you're here. It's nice to see you again. I have not seen you in literally since before COVID started. And I actually want to thank you publicly because when I first caught COVID, today is what's today's date? March 5th, I think, or something like that, March 5th. And last year, March 14th was the day that I caught COVID, and that was just like, it was very, very much in the beginning of the pandemic, if you will. And you sent me the nicest care package in the mail, and I was so touched by it because, I mean, nowadays, everyone's had it, but back then I think I was like the only person who had it for miles around that anybody knew. And you sent me like inhalers, which it was really, really helpful, and just herbal teas and vitamin C, just like a really, really, really thoughtful package. And I'm so, so grateful to have someone like you in my life, someone who cares about me like that. And it really, I was so, so, so touched by that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
It really, really was life changing. I was going out of my mind, and I realized I would never make it in prison. And that wasn't solitary. I mean, I was able to talk to people. I had my iPhone, I had Instagram and music and whatever. Prison is a whole different animal. Like, talk to me a little bit about the energy, the environment of prison. You go in every single day. That's got to suck the life out of you.
Well, it did. It does suck the life out of you. And our correctional officers really get hit hard the worst because they have to work so many shifts. They get called in and have to work, 2 days in a row, solid. They can't leave, can't go home. So it really affects correctional officers because they have rotating shifts. You need a correctional officer 24/7 in a prison. I was fortunate enough to go in and just do 4 hours in the evenings and leave every day. So I was glad for that. But with COVID, I have to tell you, this whole lockdown business that our country's gone and all over the world has been a lot like a prison. I mean, you think a prisoner's locked in a cage and not having any freedoms and not being able to come and go as they please, and that's pretty much how we've been living for the past year here in the United States. So
in the entire world, I mean,
yes.
I think that most people, especially when it came to now people aren't as locked down as they were, but when it was lockdown, we really were on lockdown. You could maybe go to the grocery store, and it really, really did get me thinking a lot about the prison system, because that feeling of being trapped, that feeling of being like stuck somewhere, and again, people, until you experience something, you can say it, you think about it, you whatever, like, it's almost like when you see a homeless person on the street, you see it, but you can like kind of put blinders on, or like you drive past a car accident, but until somebody experiences being in a crash, or until someone experiences homelessness or any kind of extreme situation like prison, you really, and I'm not at all trying to say that lockdown was or is comparable to prison, but it's the closest thing that the grand public of the world got to experience. And for the most part, especially people that are extroverts, or everyone's lives were turned upside down and just locked away. And it really got me thinking about it. It really was like, holy shit, and especially for people who are in prison for life.
Mhm.
Because there is no light at the end of the tunnel. This is your wall.
right? And they learn to survive in there. So a little bit of difference with the COVID and the prison system is that, while we're all locked down, they're in such close proximity that all communicable diseases can affect anybody in prison, including people that work there.
When
So,
when COVID was first happening, I remember you talking to me about it, and you were like, "This is scary because the COs they come and go every day. You come and go every day. You're not locked in the prison. However, if a disease or COVID or anything is infiltrates, there's no escaping it. You can't quarantine in prison. Is that correct? Unless you go to solitary confinement, which is beyond. It's probably
right,
it's
I mean,
worse than catching COVID.
they're sharing showers, they're sharing the rec area, and, they're probably not provided as many things as one would need to sanitize your living space. So whereas you and I could go, grab some Lysol wipes and wipe up, they don't have that. Um, they rely on the custody to give them a solution, which they call H1N1 flu serum, and it's basically a diluted bleach.
So because people in prison are already fighting for resources,
Hmm.
the basic needs: shampoo, body wash, Q-tips, you name it, anything that we take for granted that we have at our local CVS, all of that stuff does not come easily. So especially and especially in the unit that you worked in, which was the I think it was, you called it special needs.
It was called the snooze special
Okay.
needs unit, yes.
And so a lot of them are probably higher risk. People there that are elderly, people there who have other illnesses. And you were telling me also about how it once it did get in, it just spread like wildfire throughout the prison system and throughout all the prisons across the country. I remember reading about it,
Right.
and it was scary for you. I mean, did it make your job that much harder working in the prison during COVID times?
Well, it did because one, I had to make my group smaller. I couldn't have my normal group sizes because the area that I worked in was probably not much larger than this room here. And so we had to have 10 feet distance.
And
So,
your groups for your job, it was you were doing activities
correct.
with these
Correct. I
inmates.
worked with mentally ill inmates and, well, seriously mentally ill inmates, and providing some recreational therapy an hour per day outside of just the regular rec time was supposed to be, to help to alleviate some anxiety, cut back on the suicide rates, and, not to make their mental illness worse.
And is this something that all prisons provide, like counselors that help them with recreational activities? And if so, is it only for the mentally ill? I keep saying patients. Is it only for the mentally ill inmates, or does everybody in prison have access to the services that you provided?
Everyone in prison does not have access to the services that I provided. General population might have a gym time, okay, and that would be their 1 hour of rec. Um, the inmates that I worked with had an hour of rec time and additionally had an hour of group time where that they could. I would provide an activity such as bowling or bingo. Trivia was a big thing with my groups. They love trivia, Family Feud, Jeopardy, and so I'd have to whip up questions that, you know, I knew that they might be able to answer. At least somebody in the group would be able to answer. I couldn't pull out a regular Jeopardy card and expect somebody to know that. So I'd have to come up with questions that I knew that somebody would be able to answer. And
Like give me a for instance. What are some things that you knew they would be able to answer versus the stuff that they wouldn't?
I tried to keep it on basically a high school or a middle school level questions. Some of the Jeopardy questions that you might pull from the game are really hard. You know what I mean? So I might ask, another name for a horse,
Okay.
or trivia, some like songs. things like that.
You working in the prison system, because how did this come about for you? Was it something that you've always wanted to do? Did it kind of fall into your lap? Like, how did you end up working in prison?
Working in a prison was never anything I had imagined myself doing. However, I did go to art school, and I went back to school after getting my art degree, and I went in for psychology. My goal was to go on and get my master's degree in art therapy.
Oh, okay. My sister is an art therapist.
Okay, cool.
And she tells me about it, and she loves it, and we're actually gonna have her on the show. And
Very awesome.
I've become really into art therapy in the last year or so.
Well, my naive brain back in the day when I was in school, I wanted to work with schizophrenics and do art therapy with schizophrenics. So I'm perusing the ads, looking for a job, and I came across a recreational therapist for the prisons here in Maryland, and I applied for it. It took about, I don't know, maybe 3-4 months to hear anything back, so I had actually forgotten that I applied for the job. And next thing you know, I'm interviewing and attending training and working in the prison.
Because you apply for things, and all of a sudden when it happens, you're like, do I actually want this? Like, I apply for medical studies all the time, and they're like, all right, we're gonna take you, give you this like cancer drug that we're researching, and I'm like, do I really want the $5,000?
Actually, when I got that call for the interview, I was like, oh, God, do I really want to do this? Do I want to go into a prison? And I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna give it a try. You know what I mean? I'll go for the interview. If I don't like it, then I'll just back out of it. But I did it. It was really kind of scary to go in for my interview, and I think I had shared with you that I actually took half a Xanax before I went in for my interview, just to calm the nerves. I've never been in a prison before or a jail, so I had no idea what to expect. And you go in, even on your interview, they pat you down, you put your things through the conveyor belt, and they scan all your stuff to make sure you're not bringing any contraband or anything you shouldn't bring in. And the next thing you know, you're getting patted down, you're taking off your shoes, you're showing the bottom of your feet.
It's like going through the airport, but a little more extreme.
Yeah.
I think. So the interview was in prison.
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
And what was your first day like inside? Like, was it scarier than you imagined? Was it less scary? Was it like...
When I went in for my interview, it was pretty low key. I don't know where they had all the inmates that day. They must have been off doing their thing, but I didn't see anybody. I didn't see any inmates. I went back into an office, sat with this woman who interviewed me about, my experiences working in recreational therapy. And then she kindly escorted me over to the unit that I'd be working in so that I could see, the environment in which I'd be providing these activities. Of course, again, there was not an inmate in sight. The place smelled, fresh bleaching, and...
This is how they get you.
Yeah. And I had a correctional officer, I think he might have been, I don't know, he wasn't a sergeant, maybe a captain or something, lieutenant, come in and, well, this is where you'll be performing your activities with the inmates. You might have up to, 30 some inmates in here at a time. I recommend that you always stay next to the door and always stay near a correction officer and always be very observant of everybody around you. Don't let your guard down. He suggested that I even back up against a wall in case.
So on this interview, they pretty much were like, you're hired. Because they're already showing you to where you're doing and giving you advice.
Yes.
Is it because the prison system is understaffed?
It's very understaffed. That's why these correctional officers are working, 2 to 3 shifts in a row. Yeah.
So you then, get the job, you decide to take the job, and you go into training for the job?
Correct. I had to do training with the company that I worked for, which it was basically just a rehashing of another training that I attended in Sykesville with the Department of Corrections. So they train you all about what you can't take into a prison.
Such as?
Well, you can't take drugs into a prison, that's for sure.
Where can you take drugs?
Yeah.
Besides you're on this show, you can bring whatever drugs you want here.
Pens, for instance. If you have a pen, it has to be see-through. You can't take in the old white Bic pens because they can be used to hide contraband. You can't have a chapstick. Okay, if you want to have a lip gloss, it has to be the kind in the tube that has the flat end. You know what I mean?
I'll
Like a
know.
lotion
I'll know
bottle.
for whenever I go to prison which lip gloss I'll take.
Yeah, or
I know.
chapstick. You know
I
what
know.
I
I
mean?
know. I'm good.
Um, there's a whole slew of things you can't take into a prison.
So everything has to be see through and clear.
Correct. Even the bag that I used had to be clear. You take in food, it has to be in a baggie or in a clear container. So you stop at McDonald's and you got your cheeseburger wrapped up, you better have a baggie to slide it in because you're not walking in with it. Um,
I have heard about people that like would put stuff in their sandwiches though
mhm,
to get it in.
mhm.
So is that a thing that people like? If you are bringing in say a burger, they taking apart your burger and checking each layer, lettuce, tomato, everything to check that you're
I've
not
never
having
seen
anything.
anybody do that, but I guess they could. Now, I was at one time, I had the lead, I don't know, scanner working when I went in, and she's like, you're supposed to empty your whole bag out. They have these bins. So you take your shoes off, you take off your coat. If you have a sweater on, you take off your sweater, you put it into a bin. And you take your bag and any other personables and you put it in that bin. And they run it through a conveyor belt. They look through the little scan machine to make sure that you don't have anything you're not supposed to have. And that's it.
Um,
No open water bottles. Your bottles all have to be closed.
it sounds a lot like airport stuff, like the guidelines, similarly. Except you get patted down every day.
Yes, I would get patted down from, shoulder down. And then they check the bottom of my feet before I can put my shoes back on. Because a lot of people would stick contraband or drugs on the bottom of their feet to carry in.
Is this common though for people who work in prison to be smuggling stuff in?
Well, it's getting in there somehow.
Did you know of anybody that was smuggling anything in?
No.
If you did, would you report it or would you just turn your other way and just be like,
That's
it's
a tough
none of my
question.
business?
That's a tough question.
Has
I
any-
didn't feel safe. Like, after working there for a month, I started noticing odors. Okay, it wasn't marijuana, it wasn't cigarette smoke, it was spice or K2, whatever you want to call it.
That's not like synthetic.
That's that
weed.
synthetic marijuana, and people are crazy on that, like PCP or something, or that flocka where people are flopping around in the street. I don't want to be in an environment where somebody's and not feel safe because somebody's under the influence of that stuff.
But was it like okay? I'm gonna reference Orange is the New Black a lot on this episode because number one, it's one of my favorite shows. I've like literally it's one of, and you've seen it also,
Uh-huh,
but it
uh-huh.
really was it realistic?
I think it was dramatized a little bit.
But for the most part, was it similar? Like, what do you think that there were parts of it that were like any doctor who watches Grey's Anatomy is like this is so unrealistic. But for some reason, I feel like Orange is the New Black really gave the prison system justice.
I think Orange is the New Black might have been a medium or a minimum security prison. The prison that I worked at, there was 2 inmates to each cell. So they didn't have this open environment. So each inmate had a cell to go back to, and usually they shared with one person, had one bunkmate.
And the cell, they were literally in cells, like locked in a cell and there's just like an open toilet and.
They had a toilet and a sink in their cell, and then everybody on that unit would share a shower. So there might have been 2 showers.
Per how many?
Oh, geez, I don't know how many were on the unit. I personally worked with 38, but there was also other inmates housed in that unit as well. So
Did you ever go into the part of the prison where the cells were, or were you?
yes.
You did. Did you have to walk through it to get to where your recreational part was, or?
Well, the prison that I worked at, the way it was laid out, you would come in and you go out into a yard, and there would be several units or buildings around this yard. So I would go to my unit and I'd walk into the front door, and there would be what they call the bubble, and that's where the correctional officers are with all the equipment and all the keys and the latches and stuff that they use to unlock the cells. And then from there was 4 long corridors which would house all the cells. So I would go to one of those corridors, and the inmates that I worked with generally lived on the bottom floor, but there might have been a couple up top as well. And then they had a rec area at the end of that.
Which is like the yard at the end where they get to go outside.
Well, the yard is where the bubble, when I would come through
Okay.
and then go to the bubble. Okay.
Were you ever afraid, like walking down the hallway and just having these people staring at you from their cells, maybe catcalling you?
Yes, I
You
was
worked
terrified.
you worked at an all male prison.
Correct.
So I'm sure that like being a female in an all male prison, where what was that like for you?
Well, it was a little intimidating because they really try to scare you before you take this job. Before you say, okay, I'm in, I want to do this. Like my supervisor said to me during my interview, well, you might have feces or vomit or something thrown at you. And I'm like, oh, well, this kind of sounds like my last job working in the school system. But, you know, I never experienced that. But I will say that, you know, I did get cat calls, you know, and you don't know where they're coming from, you know, and then I'd have a lot of people or a lot of guys, you know, hey baby, hey Maria, you know, and I'd be walking in to clock in or out, and a lot of times I wouldn't be supervised. When I went to my unit to work, I always had a correction officer with me. I wasn't alone.
Yeah, I mean, because I know that there's, you know, like the whole gay for this day or whatever it is, but if you're a man who's in prison for God knows life or whatever it is, the idea of just seeing a female walking through the hallways,
Yes.
and I'm assuming that there weren't a lot of other females that worked in the prison.
Nurses. There's nurses.
Okay, so you have the nurses, but then like the COs or the warden
There
or
was
whatever.
a few female COs, but not too many. Mostly were male. It's a mostly male environment.
And this was a medium security prison?
Correct.
How do you, where do they decide who goes to minimum, medium, or maximum? Like, what's the main differences between them?
I think it depends on your crime. So if you are a multi-murderer or a federal criminal, you might end up in federal prison or a maximum security prison.
And the federal prison is basically, it's government prisons versus, were you in a private owned prison?
No, I was in a state prison.
Okay. Because I know that that's also a big controversial thing, though, of like privatizing prisons, whether or not that's a thing or it should be allowed. So you worked for the state prison, and so it's medium. So what kind of crimes did these people commit?
Well, there's a variety, but the inmates that I particularly worked with were mostly sex offenders. So
Love that for you.
child molesters, I had a couple murderers, a couple lifers, you know, from committing murder. And then you have your more of the petty, you know, like armed robbery, you know.
How do you know who did what? Who's there for what?
Well, I did only because I was nosy and would look them up. So.
I would do the same if I was
Yeah.
in especially like once you get to know them and you're like, Johnny, really? He did that? Like I would never have
Well,
expected that.
The correction officers don't want to know. They don't want to have that
Bias.
They don't want to have that bias. You know, their job is to go in and keep them safe and keep the environment safe for everybody. That's their job. So in their minds, if they know that, you know, Mr. Louis, for example, you know, was a sex offender and, you know, raped a 3-year-old, they might treat him a little differently. So they try not to know, but I've never worked in a prison before, and so I was curious, you know, what have these people done? So even having known what my inmate friends have done, I didn't feel that it biased me in any way.
So even if you knew that this person was like a 3-time murderer, it didn't make you treat them differently than the person who was a bank robber?
No.
And how do you find out what each one did?
Well, there's this thing called the Maryland Judiciary in the state of Maryland, and you can look up anybody's criminal record.
So you would just go home at
Mhm.
night and just like type them in and
Yes.
look them up?
Yes.
I heard though that people who are in prison for specifically child abuse, child molestation, whatever it is, they get like the worst. They get murdered or
They are the most vulnerable, which is probably why they were in the unit that I worked in, because it's a very protected unit. these guys that I worked with weren't mingling with the general population.
And referencing Orange is the New Black again, that was what they called it Florida over there in Orange is the New Black, right? They were like, oh, they're going down to Florida like the retirement home.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a whole like arc in the last season of Frida, who was, goes back to maximum security, and she knows that the main people want to kill her, so she fakes her way into it. Do you find that there were a lot of people who faked their way into your unit and pretended to be mentally ill or pretended to have more issues than they had?
Interesting that you should ask that, because I thought the same thing when I first started working there. Like, "Oh, these guys seem pretty normal to me. I'm expecting, rocking back and forth or whatever kind of strange behaviors that you can visibly see. And I didn't see that. And I'm like, well, how many of these people really, they're in here to be protected. You know what I mean? They just don't want to mingle with the general population and get shanked or hurt or, ostracized. But as I came to know them, I think they were all pretty legit.
Really?
Yeah.
But the minute that they start to start drama or acting like, I don't know what the word is, like the general public, they're doing what they're doing. You know what I mean? There's the prison gangs and all the crazy kingpin and the drug dealing or whatever it is that's happening. That didn't really happen on the unit that you were working on? Or did it still happen even though this was the special needs unit?
I know that there was gang members in my unit, but I never saw any particular gang activity. I do have an interesting story from when I was in training. I had gone up to a maximum security prison in the state of Maryland, and we had walked across the yard, and Chow had just let out. So we're near this unit, and all these men, are coming out of the Chow hall from across the yard and walking towards us. And I see this little guy about, 3 to 4 foot tall, okay, Hispanic guy. And he's surrounded.
Like he's like a little person?
He was a little person.
Okay.
Yeah, he was very short. And he's surrounded by all these huge men, and they just circled him. And they all walked across the yard. And I said to my supervisor, I said, who is that? And she's like, oh, he's, in a gang. And they're guarding him. I was like, you're kidding me. What did he do? You know what I mean? He's like 4 foot tall. I think he was taller than this table, literally. And I was told that he shot another opposing gang member. He was dressed as an infant, dressed as a baby in a baby carriage. And they lured this other person over, and he shot him in the head. And that's how he ended up in prison. Now, I don't think that was his first stint in prison, but that's what got him up there, that maximum security prison.
First of all, A for creativity. If you're gonna be that size and you're gonna commit crime, that's insane to me that he dressed up as a baby in a baby carriage.
Wow.
And then how do you lure someone over to a baby carriage? You pretend that this child's crying and.
I don't know. I don't know how that would have happened, but that's the story I was told. That's the story I was told. And I kind of believed it, but he must have been a very high-ranking gang member because he was guarded in the prison.
That really comes to show you, though, that first of all, what was he overcompensating for? That we got to know that. And B, it really comes to show you is that you don't know who is capable of what. This little small 3 foot person, might look harmless, and then in reality they're the top of the food chain,
right,
per se, in prison. That's really demented to pretend to be a crying baby and then have someone come check on you and then shoot them in the face.
Gangs are a really bad problem in all prisons.
And did you ever, because you said that you're not supposed to ask or whatever it is of who does what or what people are in there for, but you recognize right away that this was a different.
Oh, I recognized who is he? Because he was guarded. He had at least 10 6 foot tall men surrounding him they walked across the yard towards us, and I'm like, who is that? That he's got all these men. You could tell that he was being guarded. They were around him like a circle.
Did you do research on him after? Like, did you
No,
Google the
I
story?
asked about him. I was like, there's this guy at this prison that I went for training, and they're like, oh yeah, we know him. He used to be here, at your prison. So, oh, okay. So yeah.
So there's like some legendary prisoners that like kind of go around the different prisons and everyone knows them and they're like, oh, him, yeah, he's been in here like 6 times, 3 times.
I don't know what got him sent up to the maximum security prison, but I know that he was initially in the medium security and he was transferred. So I don't know if he had committed another crime while he was in prison, assaulted somebody. If you kill somebody in prison, you just upped your ante. So that might get you sent up to the.
When you so you went to do your training in a maximum security prison.
Hmm.
That was that much scarier than where you worked at the medium because you only have like the rapists, not the.
Well, I didn't work with. I can't say I really worked with any inmates when I was in training. I shadowed a girl, and she had one inmate that she worked with, so we were kind of like double teaming him, and he must have been a little nervous about it because he was, but it was kind of funny. But it was more of an observation and just getting the feel of being in a prison because that is something in itself. Just being used to being in that environment. It's
What it must be like super. Like, what is the environment? What is because I'm very big on energy, feeling the environment, feeling the energy in a room, and the feeling of when you walk. Do you feel this doom and gloom? As like just of. I don't know. Is it like the decaying hopes and dreams or of the life like you said if you're going to this maximum security prison, I'm assuming that people are in there for life, or most of them. There's no
7 years to life. The prison I worked at is the general.
Well, that's the one that you worked at,
Yeah.
but I'm saying even when you went into the for training in the max, I'm assuming that people are there for 20
Yes.
plus years or whatever it is,
Mhm.
and there's like the feeling of hope, right? And we were talking earlier about Corona and whatever it is. At least like everyone was like full of hope and I keep I don't even mean to keep on comparing this because it's so different. But I mean of like the idea that I have hope or the idea that all of us in any situation have hope. But is there hope for people? Like you said that this guy started off in medium and went to max. So is that typical that people get worse in prison?
Yes, there's a very high rate of recidivism in the prison. So, which generally means you get out, you go out and commit another crime, and you're back. I think there's very little people, very few, that actually don't go back and that actually make a change for the better while they're in there. There are opportunities to change your life in a prison, but I don't think most people take advantage of them. You can get educated, you can get a GED, um, you can get job training. So there's all kinds of things you can do so that you are successful when you do get released. But I don't think that the prison really addresses like ADHD, learning disabilities. It's either you sink or you swim in the education system there. So it's not like your public school system. It's not like a private school system. It's like, here's your opportunity. And it's almost self-taught in a way. You go back to your cell and you do your homework. If you don't, you blow it.
Right, but it seems though that it's like, look, people who ended up in prison, and I'm not saying that they're like, okay, I don't really believe in the idea of bad people. Of course, I think that there are some bad people that exist probably, but I think that, and this is my opinion, that people who end up in prison ended up there because of a series of events that mostly probably started in childhood or kind of led them there. Where it's so hard to break your habits that were instilled in you from childhood, that was enforced upon you, and you went through abuse. And I'm not excusing behavior, I'm not excusing murder or anything like that, but it's like the level of and you get into this prison. It's almost like you can join the gang and kind of be protected and get paid and whatever it is and have a social circle and quote unquote have a purpose, or you can be like, the loser in the corner trying to read a book and be an outcast. Like, it's like, even if someone tries to get their shit together in a prison, is that celebrated, or does the rest of the prisoners kind of shit on them, and it makes it that much harder to try to rehabilitate?
Well, I don't know if I can speak for the general population, but I do know that, there were some inmates in mine that were trying to do better for themselves and were going to be released, at least within the next year. So I don't think anybody kind of looked down on anybody, or, it almost was like in this particular unit, a special camaraderie
Yeah.
between each other because they all share mental illness. So
or
that was
or or
something
at
they
least
all
they
knew.
pretended to.
Yes, yes. I think most of them really had it.
What kind of mental illnesses did they have?
Oh, schizophrenia, bipolar, yeah.
So it's and
Paranoia, you know.
but yet they still committed these crimes.
Right,
And you said that most of them were like sex offenders.
correct.
So like rapists.
Yes, or child molesters. But I'm like you. I think that there's good in everybody, and I believe that a lot of people's misgivings or crimes that they may commit as adults stem back to when they were children. So I think you were a sex offender, then somebody's offended you as a child. Or, you might have raped a 3-year-old, within more than likely you were raped,
Right.
as a
Because
child.
people hurt people hurt people.
Right. And it doesn't make it right, but it does offer that little bit of humanity. You know what I mean?
But it does make you see them as people.
Right.
Did any of them ever like open up to you? Did you ever get close to any of these inmates where you sort of developed a soft spot for them? Like, and again, I was saying this in my intro, like, did you go in there and be like, I'm here to do a job, these are all criminals, gotta just get in, do my thing? Or did you bond with any of them? And can you bond with any of them?
Well, I'll say initially that was my perspective. I'm going into this unit for an hour, and then I'm leaving, and I'm spending the rest of my work time doing what I need to do, and then I'm leaving. And I'm leaving everything here. I'm not taking it home with me. And that's just what I did. But then as I got to know people, and I got to know maybe their likes and dislikes, because that was part of my job. What is your interests? What do you like to do? What kind of recreational activities do you like? Because everybody likes to have recreational activities. So when you start to learn more about people in that aspect, it kind of humanizes them a little bit. And so then I would find myself going home and, so and so likes Donald Duck pictures, so I'm looking on the internet for Donald Duck pictures because that's the only thing he liked to do is color Donald Duck. Okay? Seriously. And
That's
that might have been showing his grade level a little bit too. You know what I mean? His
yeah.
mentality.
I mean, kind of, or maybe it's like that was like the last time he was happy was when he was,
I never thought about it that way.
when he was coloring Donald Duck pictures. I don't know,
Right.
but also like, if let's say somebody has been in there for like 20 something years, right? So if they went in when they're 20 and now, or 18 or whatever, and now they're 40, they essentially stop living in society for the last 20 years. So like they don't know what exists out
Mm-hmm.
there, right? Like a lot of these inmates, they've probably never been on the internet, have they? Or know what an iPhone looks like, or they're kind of stuck in a time loop or time
Right.
warp. Is that does that make sense? Is
Very
that
much
right?
so. Yes, it's very much so. They hear about things, and of course, they have their phone calls, and they're talking to their family, and their family's updating them on things that are going on. But I don't think you really get a sense of any of what the world's rightly like until you walk into it and you're living it. So, I did have several lifers or long timers. One particular gentleman that I worked with is going to be getting out soon, and he's terrified. He's been incarcerated since he was 15. I think he might have armed robbery or something like that. And nowadays, if he was incarcerated or arrested for armed robbery at 15, he probably wouldn't end up in a prison. There might have been a different, there's different outcomes now, but back in that day, he got sent up the road. So he has grown up and lived in the prison since he's 15, and he's now in his probably 60s, late 60s. So he's terrified of what it's going to be like, not only of COVID, But, just how is he going to meander through the world? You know what I mean? He doesn't know how. I mean, there was payphones back when he was, there's no payphones now. So, and getting a job and the stigma and just going to the grocery store. They didn't have those
Self-checkouts.
Yeah. So it's going to be so much, for him to take in. And I try to be reassuring to him, if you could be in here since you're 15 and adjust to this life, you're going to be fine when you get out. But you're also going to be seeing the world through the eyes of a 15-year-old. So you're actually getting a chance to go back and see things differently, you know what I mean, than you would have when you were 15.
Yeah, that's so. I always think about that of like, imagine if somebody from 100 years ago like was able to wake up today and see what the world looked like today, cars or whatever it is, and just the modern day technology that we have. Like everything is so. The world is changing so fast.
Yes.
So this is a little bit like that, where he. But I mean, first of all, it's crazy that he was in there from the age of 15. Because I thought that you had to be like a legal adult of 18 to be sent to prison.
No.
I thought if not, you
No,
get
I
sent
think
to juvie.
15, 16, 17, depending on your crime, is considered a legal adult.
And he like voiced this concern to you about his fear of getting out.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
See, this was also an Orange is the New Black. I'm telling you, because all a lot of what you're saying they've covered on the show. It's really a well done show. And one of their main characters, she gets out and ends up. The system when you get out is that much harder in terms of you have to have a place to live and an address, and you need to find a job, and you have to get a way to get to your parole officer, and you have all these requirements, and it's being an adult in the real world is already so hard, that being an adult in the real world when you have all of this stacked against you from the get-go is that much more difficult. And then they end up going back to prison and they do worse, and that character, she ended up going back and then ended up going back for life as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to getting out. It's like the whole system is like rigged.
I could see how it could happen.
And you were saying earlier though, like the prison system is meant for rehabilitating you or someone, but do you find that that's what they do? Does it rehabilitate people?
I don't feel that the prisons rehabilitate at all. I think it's a holding facility, and they're caging people, and they essentially turn them into animals.
So it's almost like it makes you worse going in there.
Yes. I mean, imagine you held up a store, with a gun or a knife, and your intention was to get money to care for your mother who needs cancer treatment. Okay. And you get sent to prison, and you bunk up with somebody that's a 3-time murderer that just did it for the hell of it, or did it for gang money or for drugs. The comparison between these two people, one, you can kind of understand, why they did what they did. They're trying to help their mother, they're in a desperate situation, and then you have somebody that's just blatantly, shooting and killing over drugs or because they're in a gang. So you pair these two people together in a room, and what's going to happen? Do you think?
Right. The bad guy is not gonna learn from his neighbor and become good. He's gonna
Right.
rope this guy into
Right.
becoming. And did you ever like get to talk to these people and they get to kind of open up to you a little bit? Like, because I'm sure that like they're maybe mistrusting or something, or
Well, a lot of my guys were very mistrusting. A lot of them had paranoia. So it really took a long time for people to warm up to me. I mean, I would go in and do my job, but there were several of my inmates, they would just pace back and forth. They wouldn't participate in the activity. So I had to, develop a rapport with them, in a sense, and try to sway them into doing something that they probably didn't want to do, but ended up enjoying doing afterward anyway. But yeah, these guys are in a small cell all day long, and they come out to do this recreational activity, and they just pace back and forth because that's the most walking they've done all day. They only get to walk back and forth, which might be 5 feet in a cell. And then
so now they get to walk back and forth on like 20 feet, and
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
like a whole breath of fresh air. I mean,
Right. And there's a lot of mistrust. They don't. they have to learn to, it takes them a while to get used to you being in their environment. You know what I mean? And to see if you're trustworthy. I mean, a lot of guys with this COVID, they shut all the prisons down where you could have no visitors.
Right.
So they were doing televisits over the computer. So one by one, they'd be taken in, and there'd be a guard there, and they'd be able to have a televisit. My guys didn't like the televisits. They thought that the CIA was watching or the FBI, and that this wasn't just a genuine communication with their family member, but a trick in some way. To get them.
Are they wrong though?
Well, we're all being watched in some way, but
I personally, everyone's like, oh, they're spying on you, they're listening. I'm like, okay, what do I have to hide? Like, if they're spying on me, they're spying on everyone, and like, if there's an FBI agent listening, come on the show. I'd love to interview an FBI agent. Like, feel free to reach out. But I mean, that goes in with that paranoia and whatever, because it's like you don't have that human connection. You don't have that human interaction, that society that not that the world is that rosy these days. It's kind of crazy out there.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever norms there are, they don't see sunlight. They lack vitamin D, I'm assuming, like health issues. Like, it's just being in prison gives you there's so many negatives against you, right? And it's almost like what is the point of prison, right? And I not that this podcast is going to change anything, but it's like, people are like, oh yeah, throw them in prison. And some people do belong in prison, but like, I think that there's some countries where they say if you're caught with drugs, you automatically go to rehab instead of prison.
Mm-hmm.
That is like such a better, I forgot what country it is. There's some Scandinavian countries, I think.
Well, there's also some countries that if you steal something, you might lose a hand. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying we have to go in that direction, but I'm saying it's like, I know that, in the news recently, like Kim Kardashian, she's been really, really big. I don't know if you follow it at all with like the First Step Act and what she's trying to do and changing. She freed that woman, Marie Alice Johnson. Did you hear of her?
I think I heard a little bit about it. Yeah.
Well, basically, she from the story that we are told, and you know whatever, but she essentially went to prison for like a non-violent drug selling something, like I think it was weed. I'm not even 100% sure, because she was broke and whatever was doing to support her family, and she got like life in prison or years and years and years in prison. I might like don't quote me on the exact details. And she worked really, really, really hard to free her, and now she's made her life advocacy for helping like prison reform and stuff like that. And it's like, they should be re-looking at every single person in there and seeing, okay, did they get a fair sentence? Is this person really should be in here for 20 years, 50 years, whatever it is amount of time? Like, is there a solution? I know that you are just one person who worked in one prison, but what would your solution be of what should be done to people to kind of atone for this in prison and stuff like that?
Well, I don't think drug addicts should be in prison unless you're some sort of a kingpin, dealer. But with the war on opiates that started, back in the 80s, 90s, any little thing you're caught with, they were just throwing people in prison.
Because it's profitable?
There is a profit in prison. At the judicial system and the prisons are two different things. Now, a judge is going to decide, or a jury, about how long you're going to serve in prison, or if you serve at all. But those are two totally different things. So once you've been convicted, the prison scoops you up.
And once you're in, you're kind of just in.
You're in. And I think you were kind of touching about how the environment is, a little bit back. It's heavy. It's a very, very heavy environment in there. The correctional officers don't want to be there. The prisoners don't want to be there. I don't think anybody wants to be in a prison. So it's a very heavy environment. And
yeah, even this, even just talking to you now, this episode, like, because I generally, I'm a very lively person. I'm very outgoing, and I'm a lot of fun, and I'm a little whatever. I mean, I not to pat myself on the back, but I'm more of a happy-go-lucky
Mm-hmm.
kind of person, and I think that it reflects a lot on this show. And I try to have and obviously I like to have all different kinds of people in here, but you're even just talking to you now, it feels different. It feels more somber. It's like, man, like this convert, I'm almost waiting for us to get to the good part, you know, but there isn't really a good part. It's a horrible system with some horrible people and also some really, I guess, not like misunderstood people, but people who just have the short end of the stick, if you will. Like, can you tell me more about the people in the prison that you got to know and what their stories were? What you did you see anything like that anyone you really bonded with and you're like, whoa, this was your history?
Well, I did have a gentleman, and he may not know that I know what I know about him
Because you did your little research.
because I did my
Okay.
research. But he was new to my group. He kind of came in after I started, and he's about my age. He seemed kind of pretty, happy-go-lucky kind of guy. Not anything like you comparison, but
Thank you. Thank you.
he wasn't like off the wall or depressed. You know what I mean, or anything like that. He had come to us from another prison, which was a mental institution type prison, and his crime was that he had killed his mother. He stabbed his mother and her boyfriend.
Oh my.
I think between the two of them, there must have been 100 stabbings. So they both perished in that.
Holy shit.
But in researching and reading in the news about it on the internet, he was actually sexually abused and physically abused by his mother all the time he was growing up. His parents had separated, his father had moved to another state, social services has been involved and failed him, and he just snapped. He just snapped and he stabbed his mother. But then again, I can't imagine what it would be like to have the person that you trust the most in your life to sexually and physically abuse you, and I guess emotionally abuse you as well. So, did he have mental illness or was he mentally ill because of his experiences?
That's
But he seemed actually calm and happy, like he had found his zen, kind of, because he's away from his mom. You know what I mean? He didn't have to deal with that environment anymore. He didn't have to deal with her, think about her. And this is just my personal opinion, you know?
he may have gotten like some sort of closure, like
Yes.
from murdering his
He
mother.
got some closure,
who-
all right.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a horrific way to die, to be stabbed 100 times between the two. But it also sounds like a horrible, horrible thing to go through in your life, being sexually abused by your mother. Like the idea of it, like we, are talking about it here in a 10-second interval, but to be going through that for your entire childhood over and over and over again, like I don't see what other alternative you have. What other, and again, I'm not excusing murder, but a little bit I understand it on some level, like why, like
Yeah.
take it out of context, everybody is always like, oh, if someone tries to rape me, I'll kill the rapist or whatever it is. That's kind of what he did to just go back, he just, like that wasn't even self-defense on some level.
No, he's going to spend the rest of his life in jail, in prison.
Do you find that to some people that being in prison actually is better for them because they have a roof over their head, they have medical care, they have food, and they even given that they're mentally ill and that they don't have the ability to make it in society and have a job or anything like that, they would likely be homeless on the streets, and this prison life may not be the best environment, but it is
Better than where
stability
they came
on some
from.
level.
Yes, I do agree with that. I believe that wholeheartedly. And in this gentleman in particular.
So
You know?
he's somebody that is like doing better in prison than he would have done on
Yes.
the streets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't even imagine if he wasn't in prison, if he was non-medicated, because all the guys that I worked with were on meds. Um, I can't imagine if he was out on the street, not having insurance, being able to afford medication. What would be, he'd be homeless probably.
I have heard about that a lot of people will go into, I think I forgot what it was. There's someone who went on the news who went into a bank and held up, he had a note that
Mm-hmm.
said, "I'm holding you up for $1 because I
Mm-hmm.
really want to go to prison because I
Mm-hmm.
need surgery and there's no other way for me to get this medical care, if not," which really says more about America than it does about this guy, you know.
Right. Well, they do get pretty decent medical care.
I don't have health insurance.
Most of the guys in there, there's a lot of communicable diseases. People coming in with diseases like tuberculosis or what's the one that
I feel like HIV gets passed around a lot.
HIV is one. So there's a lot of communicable diseases, and they can actually go into prison and get treatment for their diseases where they wouldn't be able to afford or receive treatment outside of
That's
prison.
so hard. It's such a catch-22, you know? It's like
Hepatitis is the one I was thinking
what
of.
you well, everyone loves hepatitis.
Yeah, well, you can. There's a cure for hepatitis, and if you go to prison, you can be cured of your hepatitis. I don't
I'm on my way.
know.
That's I mean, I love you, but this episode sucks.
I'm sorry.
Like
You asked me here.
No, I know. No, it's interesting. It's interesting, but this just sucks. It's the whole system. Like, I'm getting angry at I'm like just why like this. It just there's nothing. There's no other way to describe it. People, are start off in a shitty situation. They do shitty things to get out of that shitty situation, and then they end up
In a
in,
shittiest
in
situation
the
as
shittiest
possible.
situation,
Yeah.
and then they either end up like murdered or raped or killed in prison. Like, does that happen a lot? Like, it's like people getting murdered in the prison. Was there anyone that got murdered while you were there that you knew of?
I'm not aware of any murders. There's been some shankings. I know they've they've done some turnovers where they shook down a room and found contraband that could be
Like a
used.
shiv?
A shiv,
What do
or
they
we
make them
call
out of?
shank. Out of anything. You can make a shank out of anything. Um, a toothbrush. They'll file down a toothbrush, the end of the toothbrush, put a point on it. Anything you could think of can be turned into a weapon.
Have you ever been in a place where you felt threatened? Where you thought that, oh my god, I'm in danger now? Did anyone ever threaten you? Did anyone ever, I don't know, did you ever have a confrontation with an inmate?
Oh, well, I'm starting to have a confrontation with one particular inmate, and it really started out with him being kind, but looking back in it, I think he was grooming me or downing the dog. Downing the duck is what they say.
Which means what?
Where an inmate gets a little something on you,
Like,
and
hey, nice sweater.
yeah,
They
to
start with that like
compliment
that.
you, or they might say, I heard, Officer Joe talking smack about you. I know he doesn't like you, and I heard what he was saying about. They'll use anything
To
to try to,
manipulate you.
yes, it's all manipulation, a tactic. Yeah.
Okay, so what did this inmate do to you?
Well, I felt kind of sorry for him because he's an old man. He's a serial rapist. Okay. And he also has been in
We
prison.
all feel bad for the serial
Yeah.
rapists. Yeah.
He's been in prison since he was a kid. So, and he's an old man now. So in my mind, I'm thinking he's been in here since he's a kid, and now he's an old man in his 70s. How much harm can he actually be now? Why are we paying to incarcerate this old man that probably isn't a harm to society anymore? But I think he still had it in him.
Was his name Bill Cosby?
No, but he skirts right along with Belle. He kind of played. Oh, I don't. He tried to make me feel sorry for him. Oh, I don't have any family left. Only my sister, and I don't really ever talk to anybody. And he did. He kind of isolated and kept to himself. But I came to learn later that was because he had weird habits.
I mean, what kind of weird habits?
Well, he would put this green gel in his hair. And he would wear his belt on the outside, which is not even supposed to have belts, but he had a belt he'd wear on the outside, and I think it was for protection. But But this green gel was really what got me, and
Where
I'm
did he
like,
get the green gel from? They sell it in commissary?
no, he made it out of Vaseline and Kool-Aid. He made it out of something in Kool-Aid. I don't want to
Oh
know
my
for
god.
sure what the other ingredient was.
What
I
if-
knew that green Kool-Aid was involved, and I did not want to know anything else about it, other than you could see these clumps, and I'm like,
Oh my god. Okay.
what's this?
Moving right along.
But he had, made me feel sorry for him. And at one point, he had come up to me at the end of the group, and he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Have a nice weekend." Well, that is a big no-no in a prison. You don't touch an employee. They shouldn't even be within 3 feet of me. And I was kind of upset with the correctional officer that was working with me because he didn't even see it happen.
Where was he?
And his eyes are supposed to be on me at all times. He was, chatting away with somebody else, So I felt very vulnerable after that. And then I kind of started getting on these COs, like, when he's around me, you are next to me at all times, and your eyes are with me. Don't turn away and chat with so-and-so. All attention should be on me and my safety, because this man felt comfortable enough to approach me and put his hand on me. Now, granted, he did it in a nice way. Have a nice weekend. But this man was like 6'5", and his hands could have wrapped around my neck twice.
And he's
Just one
also a serial rapist.
And
as
he's
you
also a
mentioned.
serial
And I know that
rapist.
I'm all for feeling, whatever, but a serial rapist is still a serial rapist, no
Right.
matter what happened in your childhood.
Right. And he definitely was not with the program. He would not take his medication. He would go on and off his medication all the time. And he started having a lot of strange behaviors. He would do this tongue flickering thing. Yeah. So you all can just imagine what that is.
right there with the Kool-Aid gel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you report him?
I did. And then I ended up getting in trouble because I should have reported it immediately, and there should have been a matter of record completed. So I had to go back and do this matter of record. And then he got mad at me because they talked to him about it. His psychologist or therapist, whatever, said, you got to follow you got to watch your boundaries. She's not here to make friends. She's here to provide activity, and that's what you're going to this group for. Really focusing on his boundaries. And he got mad at me. He remembered that. And I think he might have had a little bit of starting of dementia. I'm not sure. But, yeah, he was angry with me, and he would not make eye contact with me. He would not, make snide faces at me,
That's scary.
Yeah, it was very scary.
Because
So
these
then
people,
I really...
there's an officer watching from the distance at all times, but all it takes is like one instance or one moment of him to just be like, this bitch, and just clock you and just send you flying.
Exactly. So it was very unsettling for me to have him in my group.
Can you say, like, I don't want him in my group? Are you allowed to say that? Are you allowed to request to not have someone?
He has been sent out of my group because he didn't want to participate. He was just getting out of his cell. So, this isn't get out of your cell time. This is come to an activity time. So if you don't want to participate in the activity, you need to go back to your cell, And he made me very nervous after that because he didn't seem very forgiving, even though I tried to still include him and make him feel comfortable. Silly me. But...
Well, I mean, because it's not silly you. Like, you do, I think that, like, what we're touching on a lot here is, like, you're able to see the human behind the crime.
And they'll take advantage of you for it, too.
And it's like you have to find that balance of, I'm here to do a job, but also you're in a weird spot because you're not a CO. So you're not an authoritative figure. You're there to...
Well, I could still write a ticket.
Yeah, but that's not but that's not the reason you're there.
Right.
The reason you're there is to create, exercise and more so little bit of like a levity to their situation. So it's like you're not there to quote unquote punish them or whatever, or to put them in their place, but you also need to protect yourself, and but you're kind of on an island, like, by yourself a little bit. Like, did you get along with the other COs?
Yeah, I got along with COs, and I had a lot of respect for the COs, actually. because one, they were protecting me, and two, I mean, they work their asses off. They really do. They work their asses off. Everybody thinks that you go into a correctional facility or an institution and they're all sitting around with their feet up, sipping coffee. That's not the case at all. I mean, some of those guys have been there for 72 hours straight, haven't seen their families. The divorce rate, and probably the suicide rate is probably high for correctional officers.
Speaking of suicide, do you know of any people that have committed suicide while you were there, or people that you know of that killed themselves?
I know that there was a suicide in another prison right next to the prison that I worked at recently, within the past 6 months, and it was a big to-do. But we're all trained on how to handle suicide. Um, yeah.
And what do you do in a situation like that?
Well, I was supposed to ask, is anybody feeling suicidal today? Like,
And
how.
everybody raises their
Yeah,
hand.
everybody would raise their hand and please take me. But no, no, nobody's going to tell you that. I didn't feel that anybody was going to tell me that. And especially if you're going to ask a group of people, who's going to raise their hand and I'll look around, oh, yeah, okay, well, he's suicidal today. No, it's not like that. But there was little signs. If somebody's depressed, I might say to a CO, so-and-so's behavior seems off today or different.
Today the gel in his hair is pink instead of green.
Yeah.
Something's off. What is your take on the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing? Do you think he committed suicide?
I don't really know. I think he might have been snuffed out.
Yeah, it's definitely.
But then if I was in Jeffrey Epstein's shoes, and I don't know, I mean, when you go to jail, the first, I don't know, 72 hours is the highest risk for suicide. So when you're first arrested and you go to a jail, before you even go to a prison, 72 hours. And most suicides occur in jails.
How do they
not necessarily
do
prisons.
it? Oh, because it's before they go.
Mostly hangings, I think.
Did you see on the news recently? This happened like last week. The doctor, the Olympic doctor, not Larry, not because there was a bunch of Olympic doctors who've been like molesting girls for years, but one of them was looking at I think 20 to whatever amount of years to life, and he was right before his court case or whatever it is. He just killed himself like a few days ago.
I think
Did
I
you
did see
did you
something
see
about
about
that
this?
in the news.
And at that point, it's like we're all gonna die at some point. You lived your life, you've raped everyone that you could, and you did whatever it is, and now you're gonna go and sit behind bars. Like that, there seems like it's a better option to just end it.
Well, it's kind of interesting that some people might look at prison as a safe haven because of where they grew up or not having anything and having the security of being fed and sheltered. Whereas somebody else that's lived the higher life,
Like Jeffrey Epstein,
exactly,
right?
or this doctor that you're talking about, feel that that's the end of the road. But I will say, if you're a sex offender or you've molested children, you're probably better off to,
Kill yourself.
yeah, you're just going to get tortured or killed. So
What kind of torture do they do? Like, is this it's like gang on gang stuff? Like what kind of?
if you're a sex offender in a prison or you've molested children and you find out, because they don't generally share why they're there
It's not like
with
they
each
can.
other.
It's not like they can Google it.
Right, and it's not like you say, "Oh yeah, I'm a murderer," "Oh, I'm I'm a rapist," you know what I mean? No, they don't do that. They don't, and a lot of times they lie about why they're there, so they downplay their crimes so that they don't look so horrible, I guess, even to other criminals. But if you're a rapist, okay, or you've raped somebody's kid, and Joe Blow next door to you has a 3-year-old, he's thinking about his kids every day, all day long. And he finds out that you've, hurt a child, they're going to get you one way or another. And if it's not through a shank, it's just putting heavy stuff in a towel and just beating the shit out of you until you're bloodied and dead. When you get somebody in a rage, there's no amount of correctional officers that can make it there in time.
Have you witnessed anyone in a rage? Have you witnessed anybody in a this kind of like vulnerable situation?
I have never witnessed a rage. I have been in an activity where there's been a fight break out into another unit, and the alarms go off, and I'm escorted into the bubble, and I watch, some bloodied person walk across the yard to the med area, but nothing within my close proximity.
Has anyone ever like approached you and asking you to smuggle something in or do a favor for them? Can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? Like, because like you said earlier, people, spice or whatever it is getting in there. It's getting in somehow. Have you ever been approached in that way?
I've never been approached to bring something in, um, but they still have that downing the duck, and it could be something as simple as mailing a letter. So, have I been asked to do things that I probably shouldn't have? Yes.
Did you do that?
And I did.
What
And
kind
it
of
would be
what
like
kind of things did you do?
information off the computer. Can you look to see how much money an anesthesiologist makes in New York City? Or
Why did someone want to know that?
I
Were
don't
they
know why he
planning-
wanted to know it, and I didn't ask him why he wanted to know it.
Was he like planning on like looking into becoming an anesthesiologist once he got out?
No, I don't think he had the mental capacity for that. I don't know why he fixated on things, but he always had weird questions. He always wanted to know something weird. So he would come to me and have a little note, and he would call me Miss. He didn't even call me by my real name. He thought I was somebody else.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so he would call me this other name, and I would kind of giggle because he thought that I was related to the psychiatrist. He thought the psychiatrist at the prison was my sister.
Oh my.
Even though I've told him several times, I have no sisters here. You've never met my sisters. That's not the case. But he would call me Dr. Ward. That's what he would call me. And I'm like, I'm not Dr. Ward. But okay, at this point, I'm done with it. But he would ask me to, give him, tidbits of information off the internet. You know what I mean? Nothing weird. I mean, weird to me, but nothing.
People who just want to learn.
Right.
Or
Right.
he's living in a whole
Now,
different world.
he's also the guy that liked to color Mickey Mouse and Donald
Oh.
Duck. So I had no idea why he wanted to do it, but he was kind of a scary guy. When I first started working, he was one of my pacers. He'd pace back and forth. He wouldn't make eye contact with me and mumble under his breath. So when he asked me to do something like that, I'm like, okay, yeah, I can do that. But there was a point in time where he's, started asking all the time. It looks like I can't do that anymore. They don't want me to. I just blame another correction
It's like if you give a
officers.
mouse a cookie.
Exactly. So it's downing the duck. So they take a little bit, and then the next time they want a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and the next thing you know, if you don't do this for me, I'm going to turn you in, But it happens all the time because people are getting busted. We had recently, in the past 6 months, we had a teacher that was coming in to provide services in the prison get caught bringing in, I don't know, $250,000 worth of Suboxone. Yeah. So,
And
who would think a teacher in her right mind would do something like that? So my only thought would be that she got herself to that level where they were like, you bring in the drugs or, this is going to be the consequence.
but the consequence is like losing your job in a prison. Like it's not like
It's not just losing your
isn't the
job. I
risk-
mean, she's going to be in jail now. She's going to prison.
But that's what I'm trying to say is that if they turn you in, even if you turn you in for, I don't know, mailing a letter, okay, that you lose your job for, right? You don't go to prison for mailing someone a letter.
No, but it doesn't end there.
But do you think maybe they were paying her?
She might have been getting paid. I mean, money's a big motivation.
There's like an economy within the prison system, because like everything is being sold and
Everything has a value there.
everything has a value.
A sheet of paper is the value. Cigarettes, which I never smelled cigarettes in there, but they get in there somehow. Other commodities, like, how do they make lights to smoke their K2? You have to have a light to burn something. So how are they getting lighters? How are they getting matches? Where are these? They don't sell them in commissary, I can tell you that. But and the ingredients to make hooch, you know what I mean? Where are they getting a plastic container, and hosing to make?
How do you make the hooch? That's like the alcohol, right? Like
Yes.
the drink. And what would it be made out of?
I think they also call it jump. It made fruit, bread, I don't know what other ingredients. I've never made it. I heard it was nasty, and I've smelled it. It smells awful. I don't know how anybody could drink it. I have had people show up to my activities drunk or under
high?
the influence of something. Yeah.
And what do you do in a situation like that?
Oh, I just act like I'm out in the regular world, you know.
Do you report it?
There's been a couple times where I have reported to the correction officers that, so and so seemed like he's under the influence of something. His pupils were huge, and I might give some,
And do they care, or is it just like he's not beating anyone up?
I think they do care because somebody that's vulnerable, somebody that they can create a bigger problem. If they're drunk, you lose your inhibitions. You might get in a fight with somebody, so that's going to create a bigger problem.
If they're really high, they might punch you in the face, or
Right.
I think that when you were saying that people, the guy who scared you, right? He liked the Mickey Mouse, whatever it is people that are unpredictable are the scariest.
Yes.
You don't know what their next move is. You don't know what they're gonna do. And I know that you were telling me a lot about this because when you started working at the prison, you changed your name on Facebook.
Correct.
Because you were like, I don't want anybody to be able to find me if someone from the prison talks to their family member outside of it. Like,
I didn't want anybody looking me up. Right.
There's a lot of like things you have to do to like protect yourself. It's hard even once you're clock out. Even once you leave the job, there are things that you have to do in your everyday life that you have to.
Because you got to figure, inmates have nothing better to do with their time than to focus on everybody else. So they study you. That's not necessarily for revenge. It's for manipulation. So they'll study you. They know how you interact with other people. They may see how you interact with the correction officers. You have to be very careful about what you say about other people because they'll take anything they can and use it against you. It's all to manipulate you. Yeah. They watch you. They know how you interact with other people, how you dress. Okay, says something about you, and that was another thing in itself with my job. There was no crop pants above the ankles because everybody knows ankles turn heads these days.
Well, actually, I growing up religious, the women in our society weren't allowed to show their ankles either, so I understand that.
Or I went to Catholic school. We weren't allowed to show anything either.
Elbows. Yeah, you see, there you go.
But it was almost like going back to school. Working in the prison, I felt like I was back in Catholic school. You can't do that. Yeah, it was a dress code.
What is something...
You don't want to be attractive. I didn't wear makeup in there.
First of all, you're a beautiful woman, but I think that had you been just like a female with a pulse in prison, or not even female, just anybody with a pulse that's not in the prison, like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like,
I didn't want to gain any more attention.
When you're a lifer and you have not seen a member of the opposite sex in 20 years, it could be, I don't know, somebody that's not.
I wasn't trying to get any more attention than I would as
right.
if,
you're not trying to stand out.
Right. I didn't want to stand out.
You're trying to be understated.
And they teach you that in training. You don't want to stand out. You don't want to stand out at all as an employee in a prison. I did have a guy that hit on a nurse. This has been in the past 3 months. And he ended up going to solitary. He wrote a kite, which is a little letter. Wrote a little letter to this nurse about how pretty she was and whatnot. And they sent him to solitary.
You go to solitary for giving someone a compliment.
He wrote a letter. It's against the rules to pass a kite. Just like the inmate that touched my shoulder, that's against the rules. He should have been in solitary. He actually touched me. This other guy wrote a letter, but she must have complained about it. I don't know.
What is your opinion on solitary? Do you think it serves a good purpose? Not that any of this serves like.
I think everybody needs a timeout sometimes, but I think locking grown people in cages, in rooms, and not attending to them is very cruel. I think there's got to be a better way to...
Solitary, they have nothing. They don't have a book.
They strip you of your clothes.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
When you're in solitary, you're naked?
Yes.
I did not know this. They do not show that on Orange is the New Black. So you have...
Yeah, they don't want you to have anything that you could harm yourself with. There's no no books.
Do you have a pillow?
I don't think you even get that.
A blanket?
You can't have anything that you could harm yourself with.
So you have a cot? What do you have?
You might have a little metal cot to lay on. I don't think there's any pillows. Nothing that you can harm yourself with.
When people went into solitary, and they came out, were they changed? Were they different? Would it make them worse? Did it make them better?
I only knew one guy that went to solitary that was in my group, that actually spoke to me about it. And he kind of was chuckling with me one day, and he said they could have used you in solitary. Not necessarily to use and abuse me, but to provide some activities to help them pass the time away because they have nothing. And the guys that I worked with were fortunate enough that if they took their medication, the state would provide them a small television that was clear. You can see all the guts inside of it. But yeah, a very small little television.
In solitary?
No, in their cells. Yeah, because there's not TV and.
Oh, there isn't? There's no, like...
Maybe some prisons, I don't know. I mean, I've known other people to go to prison, and they said that they were living the life. You know, they had a television, they watched movies, they had popcorn and stuff like that. But that has not been my personal experience.
When you're a celebrity and you go to prison,
yeah,
you know, like Martha Stewart or whatever.
Yeah, she probably did.
You get what do they have any kind of entertainment? Like, do they have music? They have radios? They have books? Like, what do they have?
I think that they have radios, and they may have some books. And I know, families can mail things in. It's gone over with a fine-tooth comb to make sure there's no contraband. Yeah. But
do you know who's, like, running the shit in prison? Like, who's in charge of what? Who's the kingpin? I mean, I know when you went to that training, you saw the little guy who was like, and you noticed right away, but do you know, like, who's who and who's the scary one and who's kind of...
No.
Did you get involved in the politics? Or not involved, but, like, to know, like, what's up?
No, I went in with the idea that the less I know, the better off I am.
Except for the people you Googled.
Yeah, well, that's different. That's working one-to-one with somebody. I'm talking about the prison as a whole and who's running the prison, because, we have 4 major gangs, in the prisons in Maryland. You got the Bloods, the Crips, the MS-13s, and then the DMI, which is the Dead Man Incorporated. So, you got your Hispanics, you got your blacks, and then you got your KKK kind of people, white supremacists. So I don't know who's running what. I don't know how things go with that flow. But, when you get into these gangs and you got high-ranking gang officials in prison, I'd imagine that they're calling all the shots.
Was there anyone in there on death row?
No, I'm not aware of it.
That's just for, like, max,
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming. What do you wish that you knew before you went into prison? Or not went into prison, when you went into work in prison?
What do you mean?
I don't know. Knowing what you know now, is there something that you wish that you had?
I have never felt comfortable from day one going into the prison. I've just not being able to wear my bra, a regular bra.
Why can't you wear your bra?
Well, they don't like underwire. It sets off the alarm system when you're scanning through and getting patted down. So that was, a big changer for me. It's like changing your underwear. It'd be like you switching from boxers to briefs, and how comfortable would that be for you?
Or the opposite.
Or whatever, just a complete change of what you're used to. You know what I mean? So that set me off
from day one.
And every day that I'd go in, I would put on my damn non-underwire bra, and it would just immediately changed me who I felt like
what you're comfortable with.
Yes. And so I have never felt comfortable walking into a prison to go do my job. And I have to say that I actually started feeling more comfortable with the inmates than with the correctional officers. I think that the correctional officers were really stressed, and I wasn't. And so I was picking up on that energy. You know what I mean? So I felt like my job's here to provide this activity for for the inmates, and I'm going to try to do the best I can to make it fun and interesting for everybody. And then I'm going to roll right on out of here and take this damn bra off when I go.
How has prison changed you? How, do you feel like it's changed you in any way, that you're different now than you were going into this?
I think I have a lot more sympathy for prisoners, inmates.
Yeah.
Yeah. Having a degree in psychology, I've always gone towards, the people. But, I went in with this idea that prisoners and inmates are criminals and, they're bad, they're no good, bad seeds. And it humanized and it changed my thinking. Now, I'm not going to say I've never known anybody on the shady side. Out here in the real world, I've known plenty of people like that.
And I'm sure that there were probably people on the inside who you're like, yeah, you belong here.
Right.
You should be here.
Right.
Right. The Jeffrey Epsteins or whatever it is, who are just actually bad people.
Right. But some of those guys were, had families and mom and a dad, and, is our judicial system fair? And, why does this, Harry go to prison for 5 years for, a dime bag, and Joe's gone to prison for 1 year and he had a, kilo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's a lot of unequalness and disparity, and, it kind of brings it home when you're sitting there in front of it and you're looking at it, And then you have to see them, the way they're dressed. They're dressed in rags. You would think that the state of Maryland would kick out a couple of dollars for them to have some new clothes. I mean, they only wear gray and denim, and of course they have DOC on the back of, printed
Right.
on the back. These guys, some of them had holes in their crotches and holes in their socks, and they can spend some money and go to the commissary and buy things. But, when you're only making 5 cents a day, it might be
At their prison jobs.
Yeah.
Well, is there anybody that really, like, sticks out in your mind as someone that you just, like, especially bonded with on some level, or you like if you had a get out of jail free card where you could take somebody and say, you don't belong here, I would free you if I could. Is there somebody that really comes to mind that you're like, would quote unquote like save if you could, or someone, I don't know, like, because you're obviously not going to keep in touch with anyone, right?
Right.
Even if they get out, you're not going to like meet up for drinks. Like,
I
it's
hope
just
nobody contacts
right.
me.
But is there somebody that you wish you can kind of, I don't know, someone that sticks to mind that
Well, I had a gentleman. He's since been released, but he was a very nice. I don't know what he did. I never looked him up. He was just a really super nice guy. He was always super polite and greeted me and would share things with me, poetry. He liked to write, and so when he left, I kind of missed him, and I hoped that I hope he's doing well. I mean, he had tattoos all over his face. God bless him, and that's probably gang related. But he didn't seem like somebody that fit into that. And he recognized that he had mental illness, and he actually thanked me for coming in and providing activities for the mentally ill in a prison, because they realize, who wants to go in there and do the kind of job, I did also have 2 helpers that weren't in my group. They were also inmates, but they weren't in my group, and they were really a lot of help to me, and I hope to see them be successful sometime. One of them was a high profile.
I was going to ask you that. Did you have any high profile cases?
Well, the one case I told you about, was kind of high profile in Maryland.
Which case was that?
The one where he stabbed his mother
100
times, and her boyfriend. Another high profile case I had within Maryland was a guy from another state was part of a murder for hire scheme in Maryland. And the guy that hired him wanted his girlfriend or wife, I don't know what she was, knocked off. And so he came to Maryland and finished her off for money, and then ended up getting screwed out of the money. And I think he ended up, from what I read, testifying and plea bargaining. So he's probably going to have 30 years for murder.
What is the average amount of time that people have in there?
It just depends on your crime.
Did you ever?
And it depends on your judge, you know. Like I said,
No, but I'm saying
you
the
can be a
people
black
there.
guy and go in for, you know, a kilo, and you're going to get 10 years, and you can be a white guy in court with a kilo and get 1 year. So
The
it's
system,
not fair.
The system is very racist.
It's racist and it's unfair.
Was there a disproportionate amount of black people in there versus white people versus
Yes.
Hispanics?
Yes. Yes.
And it's horrible because again, these are people like it's been proven that if you live in poverty, you know, and you're going to commit crime out of desperation, like we said earlier, and a lot of these people, it's the having the card stacked against you from day one. You know, I don't think that people born here are just there's more bad people born here. It's like no, when you keep oppressing people and putting them into the society and ignoring their basic human needs, you know, and you know, I mean, if you can look what's going on, you know, in Mississippi now, they have no water. Flint, Michigan, no water. Like all these downtrodden areas that you already have such a low quality of life, and the government is not doing anything to help you, and you turn to desperation and you sell drugs or you do God knows what to help make your life a little bit better, and then you end up in prison. Like at some point, you know, the definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing. It's not working. At some point, we have to look in the mirror and be like, maybe America has such a problem with criminals because we don't provide a good quality of life to most people out here in these streets. And if we did something better to help them with education and helping them with getting their life together, they would then take those tools to make good lives for themselves and good choices for themselves. And it's such a difficult situation to be in.
It's messed up, actually. I mean, I just read an article yesterday about an African American boy that was being held back. He was a senior in high school. He passed 3 classes in his high school career. 3 classes. They moved him along every grade. He failed Algebra 1, he failed Spanish 1, but yet the next year they put him in Algebra 2 and Spanish 2. So he's gone his whole high school career, and his mother just come to find out that, you know what, they're not going to graduate him now. They're going to put him back in the beginning. Well, what was going on for these past 3 years that nobody ever notified or corrected this situation, that this poor boy
Right.
is going to have to go back and repeat or not graduate or get a GED.
Right, and then he has no prospects now for a job.
Exactly.
And then someone says, hey, I can make you a lot of money if you do X, Y, and Z, and you're 18 years old, and the next thing you know, you're working for the kingpin in the prison, and the system is just stacked against you.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
Tell me something good. Give me some hope.
I'll give you some hope.
Tell me something good. What's been the most positive experience of working in the prison? Something that good came out of it.
Well, I feel that I went in and I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I went in and I provided an hour of entertainment.
That is something really beautiful to think about, that these people have really, really hard lives, and you could have gone in there and you may have changed someone's life in there. You may have been like, you know what, this hour a day that I got to spend with Michelle, and she, treated me like a human, and she was kind to me, and she smiled at me and was, had this human connection and didn't look down on me. That can be all the difference that someone needs. And I'm a very big believer in that you never know what someone's going through, and you never know what small action that you do that can change someone, that butterfly effect. And you just saying, hey, how are you today, and smiling at them could really be like, you know what, I want to work hard and I want to get out of here and I want to work in the real world and be around people like Michelle. And knowing that you went in there and you could have had a completely different attitude. You could have been like, I'm here to do a job, fuck you, whatever, gone. So it's great that you had the ability to possibly change people.
Well, they say if you can help one person, just one, it's enough. So I think I've helped at least more than one.
That's really amazing. Before we finish up over here, I always end every episode asking for advice that you would have for anybody considering a career in the prison system, because it's important work. It's work that needs to get done. And if someone listening to this episode and said, you know what, I want to do that, I want to make a difference, I want to go in there, what advice do you have for them?
Don't down the dock. Don't get downed on the dock. And, see people as humans. I mean, going in there with the mentality that people are bad because they're in prison, it doesn't define exactly who you are or who someone is. So having an open mind, and don't get married because you're probably not going to see your spouse.
How do you think you would do in prison if you had to go?
I probably would never leave my cell. I wouldn't leave my cell, and I'd just do a lot of crosswords. I don't know. I don't want to know. I'm never going to prison because I'm not doing anything that's going to get me there. But innocent people in prison too. So
yeah, I always think about it. Like, how would I be? I was like, I'll just be friends with everyone, because I just keep my ego aside, just be like, I'm good,
See, I wouldn't want to be friends with anybody.
Well, not actually friends, but just like be good with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like never confrontational, and just be like jolly, like be on everyone's good side.
You're gonna be. I wouldn't recommend that. They'll take advantage of you. But don't go to prison.
I'm not intending to.
Okay.
I'm not intending on going to prison at all. But yeah, thank you so much for making the trip out here today and coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's been like an absolute pleasure talking to you. I have to say this was not the most. It was an important episode. I will say that it wasn't the most fun. It wasn't the most entertaining. It wasn't the most exciting. But I think it's something that America has a huge prison problem. The world does, but America, the prisons for profit, the money that it's made, the way that they do not rehabilitate people, and if the fact that you came out here and you were able to shed some light on this industry, and I don't know if anything that can be done to make changes for it. It's like just hearing you talk today really gave me some knowledge and insight into that world, and I appreciate you for that. And I appreciate your friendship.
I appreciate your friendship.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of It's My Job to Know Yours. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Hit that like button. Subscribe, comment, let us know what you thought. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. As always, a huge thank you to Studio Cube for providing us with this wonderful studio in this space. Stay tuned for future episodes, and see you on the next one. Thanks. Well, I just did my job, so now it's time for you to do your job, which is to hit that subscribe button. Because if you don't do your job, I'm going to lose my job, and let's face it, I'm qualified for nothing.